both of them did it immediately. Transferred the running of the country immediately. Yeah, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Well, that's a rather striking commonality, I thought. But also, the really earth-shaking thing is that Hitler Mayer says that this was all done at the orders of the largest bankers in Germany. That his immediate supervisor, General Ludendorff, was meeting on a weekly basis, with the largest bankers in Germany at the Four Seasons Hotel. I mean, it's not like they don't give you the full background on that. Well, I'm going to finish the story because it'll take 30 seconds. The Four Seasons Hotel is where the Holocaust was run from. That's not a particularly difficult piece of information to track down. Well, who benefited from the Holocaust? One of the really, really astonishing pieces of information put out by a Holocaust denier, and I'm in no way, shape, or form a Holocaust denier, but this guy points out that the plans for the Holocaust were developed after all of these German reversals on the Russian front, that the Germans were essentially losing the war when they decided to divert all of these resources into the extermination of Jews who were working in defense plants. Right? It just didn't make any sense. The question then is, who benefited from the Holocaust? And the answer is that the bankers got to keep $1 trillion, 1945 dollars, in their depositors, right? Jewish depositors to the banks, because they exterminated the entire family. There was nobody there to collect the money, and there's all sorts of really, really horrible stories about people coming in with a bank book and for their father's bank book and asking for the money and being chased out the door into Jewish banks as well as Aryan banks, and being chased out the door and being told to come back with a birth certificate, but being really, really insulted. And of course, they didn't issue death certificates. They didn't issue the Nazis didn't issue death certificates anyway. And I'm also working on a bunch of stuff about. One of the things that I'm really trying to do in putting this movie out, I couldn't not, because I was so involved in it, but it was a distraction from the next JFK movie that I want to do. There's really all sorts of really important and earth-shaking new evidence in the Kennedy assassination. And a lot of it has to do with disinformation. Trump made a big deal about releasing Kennedy files, and the only one that I've seen hit the news is a file that says that Oswald was in Mexico talking to a Russian assassin, which is the official CIA story of what happened. And as a matter of fact, the morning of the 23rd, the day after the assassination, McCone, the head of the CIA, called up Johnson and said, Oswald was in Russia talking to a Russian assassin specialist, and Johnson says to McCone, "Oh my goodness, this is terrible. This is going to mean World War III, isn't it?" And McCone says, "Yes." And Johnson says, "Well, let me go kiss my kids goodbye," and hangs up the phone. And the phone rings, and it's Hoover. And Hoover says, "I have the audio tape of Oswald in Mexico, and I have the photographs of Oswald in Mexico, and it is not Oswald in Mexico. It is an imposter, and the CIA is lying to you and trying to provoke World War III." Anyway, and I'll drop one more bombshell, but the important work
stuff, John. This is amazing stuff, because I've seen your JFK films, and I've seen them more than once, and they're outstanding. John Hankey is our guest, folks, the filmmaker and journalist we've been talking about. Is Trump for real? And John has laid he's painted a narrative, and he's backed it up with hard evidence that Steve Bannon and Cambridge Analytica basically took the backers of Adolf Hitler, took their playbook to present Donald Trump as something which he wasn't, to stir up the alternative right and the disenfranchised right across America, who are fed up of corruption and wars and the deep state. And it's brilliantly done. It really is, John. I have to say that. And it's really important.
Well, I really appreciate that, especially coming from you. Something that I hadn't dealt with in the film because I didn't really have my hands on it, right? This is a big topic, but the Russia investigation, right?
Yeah.
I guess I said that at the top, that the Russia investigation is a giant psyop to make Trump look like he's beleaguered and Trump has never shown any favoritism towards Russia. It's been sanctions and indictments and sanctions and indictments. And did I mention that it came out a couple of days ago that Bannon not only hired the British military intelligence people, he hired the Israeli intelligence people. Now, if you're working for the KGB and you want to kill somebody, are you going to use bullets that are only manufactured by the KGB, or are you going to use bullets that are only manufactured by the Mossad or the CIA or some other opposition intelligence agency? I think the answer to that is obvious. You certainly are not going to use something that's traceable only back to you. You're going to use something that's going to trace back to your opposition. And that points to the individuals who were perhaps supposedly, and I guess, they were poisoned with stuff that could only be traced back to the KGB. Well, if that isn't British intelligence, then it's Mossad. But my point was this one. And it's in the Washington Post, I believe, or maybe it's New York Magazine, and I can actually tell you the name and the name of the author. But the Trump campaign, and let's say Steve Bannon, because that's more accurate, but they didn't put it around his neck. They laid it at the door of a guy named Gates. They recruited the Israeli military psychological warfare operators to aid them in their campaign, and they talk about hiring trolls, right? But if I'm Israeli, I'm not going to hire Israeli trolls so that when they get exposed, all that blowback comes to Israel. I'm going to hire Russian trolls. And you go ahead and try to persuade me that the CIA and the FBI don't have more resources at their disposal and can't have figured that out on their own. They certainly know that.
Of course they do.
But they're going after the Russians, and it's just a psychological operation. It's just baloney, start to finish.
And it serves, it serves to reinforce the narrative that Trump is constantly being attacked by the deep state and the Democrats. So Trump's supporters love it. They love hearing that. It's what they want to hear. They want to hear that this man who hasn't done a single thing that he said he would do, they want to still believe in him because they can't face the reality, the horror of the fact that this man is not what they believed.
Well, he's Bush on steroids, right? Jeb Bush, and I don't know if I said this, but a huge percentage of in the video it shows a scientific poll conducted in the United States by one of the leading universities showing that 62% of a random sampling of the American people thought that 9/11 was an inside job. Well, I'll tell you what, if 62% of U.S. citizens think that, 90% of Trump supporters think that, right? And which is why Jeb Bush had $120 million in his war chest, and none of his opponents had $1 million, and he had $120 million. He could never get more than 4% of the vote because the Republican working stiff knows that 9/11 is an inside job, and they couldn't possibly be one to supporting Jeb Bush. So Steve Bannon had been screaming at these guys, you have to find a different approach. You have to find a different approach. And then he found somebody to fund it and went out and found the different approach. And the different approach to the question of how do we get Jeb Bush to be the president was you get Donald Trump to be the president, and then you have him implement the program that Jeb Bush would have implemented in the first place if he anyway, you got the picture.
I do. Can I ask you a question on this? This is an opinion-based question. Before I do, though, I'm going to plug the bejesus, as we say in the old country, out of the film. Is Trump for real? John Hankey is our guest. I've put links on my Twitter. I will leave them there for the next couple of days up at the top of the page. A link to where you can watch the trailer, and you can rent the film for 99 cents. 99 cents, folks, come on. We've got to support independent documentarians like John. We have to. And can I say this? If you're a Trump supporter and if you're a bit triggered, and if you listen to this program, and I know that Trump fans do listen to it because they like some of the things said on the show, please try and clear your mind. Watch it, give it a fair go. At the end of it, say, that John Hankey's a bastard, but at least watch it. Watch it first and watch it with an open mind. That's what you got to do.
Listen,
go ahead, John.
John John Hankey is a bastard, but I have a lot of good friends who are Trump
Who would tell you
supporters,
that?
and I was one of them. And
Have they watched it, John?
I was one of them.
Have they watched it? Have your Trump supporting friends, have they seen the film yet, and what have they said about it?
It's brand new.
Yeah, I know it's brand new.
I haven't gotten any. No, it's brand new. It went up yesterday.
Yeah.
You didn't see it before yesterday, I'm quite sure.
No, of course not. No, I saw half an hour of it today. I'm going to watch the rest of it later. Genuinely.
Anyway.
Go ahead anyway, John. Yeah. So they haven't seen it yet.
I don't know what people's, and I do know that everybody will have a different reaction. But, you were talking about independent filmmakers, and one of the major points is that Steve Bannon and these military psychological operation guys have grasped that. And, 10 years ago, I made JFK to the Bush Connection, and it was a huge hit on YouTube. These guys made Loose Change. And it had 30 million, the New Yorker magazine said it had 30 million hits.
Yeah.
Right? And the New Yorker is not going to exaggerate that point. And it used to belong to the independent filmmakers. Those guys have figured that out. And there's so much really, really well-crafted disinformation out there. Bannon is the guy who made, you can find this in out of his mouth. He's the guy who made Clinton Cash. Clinton Cash looks like it's an independent film, and it looks like it's, it's made by me or somebody like me. And in fact, it just rips my heart out to see them steal techniques of mine where they, it's one of the things that I like to do is put the printed page up there so you don't have to take my word for what it is that this particular individual said. I show you the cover of the book and we turn the pages and you get to zoom in and you get to read the text. In Clinton Cash, they do the same thing. They show the headline, they zoom in on the text, and they tell you what it says, only they don't show you the part that they're talking about. And I stopped it. I put it on pause. And, the great thing about the Internet, I took 4 words out of the article that they were showing me, and you put it into Google, and it brings up the entire article, and it doesn't say anything remotely. It says exactly the opposite, in fact, of what they are purporting that it says. There's all sorts of just incredibly subtle, poisonous crap out there